go ahead and jump into UFC Vegas 58. It went on last night. The main event, we had Rafael dos Anjos taking on Rafael Fiziev, or sorry, got those flipped up. Rafael dos Anjos versus Rafael Fiziev. And that was a really close contested matchup. We were seeing a lot of good things out of Rafael Fiziev. His ability to deny takedowns, keep it standing. I think there was a time in the third round where Rafael dos Anjos got in real deep on him. It was one of those takedowns or where fighter kind of throws a right, guy's going to take that, after the takedown, ducks under, kind of hits his shoulder or his chest area into the guy's hip bone. Like that's how deep it is, and you expect those to head up and end up dumping the guy on his back. And somehow Fiziev was able to use his muscular kind of build. He has a really strong torso area, back, core, chest area to kind of avoid being able to be taken down. Ends up where they're both kind of almost face down, and then Fiziev ends up in a dominant position. So it was really interesting to see a fighter with the strength and the build of Rafael Fiziev being able to deny the takedowns of someone as accomplished in takedowns as RDA, be able to keep the fight standing. It was only in the fourth round where RDA really got a meaningful takedown, was able to sit down Rafael Fiziev. I think the round ended pretty much with Fiziev on the ground. He got up, I think, at the last second, and then the round was over, and then he came out in the fifth round and absolutely starched RDA with it looked like a fake knee to a right hand to a left overhand that ended up putting down RDA, follow-up punch, and that's when Mark Smith had got in and broken it up. It was a really good showing by Rafael Fiziev. RDA, considering the caliber of fighter that I put Rafael Fiziev at, I think RDA had a really good and strong performance. It just ended up that this go round, Rafael Fiziev was the better fighter. And I think you fight that fight 10 times. I do really think Fiziev comes out 7 or 8 those times as the winner. So Rafael Fiziev, I'm really interested to see what he goes on to do next. I think people are talking about him versus Justin Gaethje, really towards the top of the division. Now, RDA was only 7 or 8. And Fiziev was 10. So to get a win over a guy who's 7, ranked 8, I don't know how much that's going to do for him, but I think the overall body of work and showing that he can deny takedowns, and we already know that he can stand and bang and put away, some of the best of them. So Rafael Fiziev, I'm really interested to see what he goes on to do next. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Cabarallo versus Armen Petrosyan. That was a 5-round decision, and Perallo went out there and he showed that while his striking may not be on par with Armen Petrosyan, he absolutely can take down and hold people there and do damage from the top. And Cabarallo, he had shown that against previous opponents. He goes out and shows it again here. He shows that he has really good fight IQ, and that's what that tells me the most, is that he knows that, hey, this guy has a better, kind of dissimilar from what we saw from Sean Kingston. Wow, that was a throwback. From Sean Strickland 2 weeks ago, where he went in and he thought that he was going to be able to stand and bang with Alex Pereira, goes in there and gets starched. When you have an advantage, especially something that your advantage is your opponent's weakness, you're going to want to go and exploit that. This is fighting, all's fair in love and war. Fighting, I think, is a fundamental foundation piece of war. So if you're going to say, all's fair in love and war, I think you got to include fighting. And when you're going against a guy who has a weakness that is your strength, you have to exploit that. Sean Strickland didn't do that. Kai Barallo did do that. He has shown that he has grappling, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling prowess. And he went out there and he showed that he can take down Armen Petrosyan. He can avoid powerful shots coming back at him, and he can hold somebody down. So I think that's going to be really interesting for him moving forward. Armen Petrosyan shows that he's still really good on the feet, but that he needs to work on his takedown defense as he gets to the top echelon of the division. Said Nurmagomedov versus Douglas Silva de Andraj went the way that we thought it was going to do. Said Nurmagomedov was able to use his feet, or use his ability on the feet, should I say, to outpoint Douglas Silva de Andrade whenever it went to the ground. Said Nurmagomedov showed that he had a capable ability on the ground as well, taking that one by decision. We were all shocked when Chase Sherman and Jared Vanderaa went into the third round, and to be honest, both of them did look gassed, but I didn't think that fight was even going to get to the third round. I thought these were two big heavyweights who aren't the most in shape looking guys. Jared Vanderaa, it was so frustrating why he would not take down Chase Sherman. He went and he took down Alexei Olenek By the way, Jared Vanderaa kind of looked a little bit like Alexei Olenek coming in with a shaved head and oddly out ears, and oddly pointy. He kind of looked like Nosferatu a little bit, if everybody knows what I'm talking about. Kind of like a devil type of persona, but Jared Vanderaa came out there. We know that he has somewhat wrestling ability because he was able to take down Alexander, Alexei Olenek. He was able to take him down and actually control him on the ground for the first portion of that fight. So the fact that he decided to go against that grappling advantage that he had against Chase Sherman and just stand and fight with him was really, really questionable. It kind of just goes back to what we're talking about Kai Baralo and having good fight IQ to take advantage on somebody's weakness. Jared Vanderaa decided not to do that. Can't say that that's incredibly out of character for a caliber of fighter that we are watching between him and Chase Sherman. But good on Chase Sherman being able to put him down. Jared Vanderaa didn't look like he was all that interested in the fight and that he really wanted to win. If he did, I think he would have taken down Chase Sherman. Good on Chase Sherman. The Vanilla Gorilla gets a fight, and he won a couple rounds in the UFC. So that's interesting for him. Keeping going with the main card, going down to Alman Zahabi versus Ricky Tercios. That fight was largely a dud. I thought it was going to be a lot more interesting than it was. It had more yelling from Ricky Tercios about what he was potentially going to do, trying to throw off Alman Zahabi. Zahabi was on his back foot the entire fight, but was still able to see what Ricky Tercios was coming at him with, be able to avoid it. I think Tercios only landed like 30 or 40 strikes the entire fight, throwing well over 200. So really, really boring fight. Question makes you scratch your head at what the thought process was there for Ricky Tercios going against Ayman Zahabi, just kind of missing a lot of strikes and throwing a lot of volume doesn't necessarily translate to the judges' scorecards unless you're gonna land. And he didn't do any of that. Michael Johnson and Jamie Malarkey, really interesting fight. That one, I can't believe that actually ended up going the distance. Both guys were bloody and battered by the end. Even in the second round, I believe Michael Johnson was starting to leak a little bit from his eye. Jamie Malarkey was leaking from his nose. That was a really, really good fight. It's a shame that that's kind of had Alman Zahabi and Ricky Tercios right above it because it gave you a false sense of what the card was going to be. But regardless, and maybe that was why we weren't as thrilled with the Zahabi Tercios fight because we just saw a banger right before that. But either way, I really liked the performance by Jamie Malarkey going out there. He was able to use his reach and he was able to hit Michael Johnson a fair bit. It was a back and forth fight. I think Jamie Malarkey definitely deserved to get the win there. He was winning the majority of the fight, but Michael Johnson wouldn't go away. And in true Michael Johnson fashion, got into an absolute scrap. And, I'm interested to see what we're going to get from him, where he goes in the division from that. And then Jamie Malarkey, he's 15-5 at this point. He's lost to some of the top echelon people in the division, but I'm thinking, he's going to get a slight bump in name notoriety, especially if he's going to go out there and put on absolute scraps. That's what the UFC wants first and foremost. I mean, they want people who are going to win, but they also want people who are going to go out there and put on entertaining fights because it is an entertainment business. And whether you're going out there, and that was the thing that I think really solidified the hype around Conor McGregor. Not only was he a fantastic talker, but he would go out there and he'd put on really exciting fights. Same thing with Michael Bisping. They would talk, but they'd go out there and put on really, really exciting fights. And same thing with Chael Sonnen. Now, Chael Sonnen, his fights were maybe less exciting, but it was always interesting to see what he was going to do and say before and after. So, and he went out there and he had beaten Anderson Silva for the majority of a fight until he got submitted in the last few minutes of the fight. So, I think it's super important that you go out and you have really entertaining fights and that you win, of course, but it's also important that you have a really, really good microphone and marketable personality. And I think with guys like Sean Strickland, he doesn't have the entertainment value of his fights to back up what his vocal mic skills are. So he would want to go out there. We want to see him get a little bit more fantastic knockouts, and he would be your picture perfect kind of poster boy for the UFC. Israel Adesanya, he was right there. He had really interesting fights. He had amazing knockouts. The Kelvin Gastelum back and forth fight comes to mind. His knockout of Paulo Costa, and then he goes and he has this marketable personality. That is where that superstar kind of backing comes from and what the pieces you need to make that. And unfortunately, I don't think the UFC, Israel Adesanya now putting on somewhat lackluster performances, I'm not so sure that he is the promo guy. He is the person that the UFC thought he was at first, because his fights put people to sleep, and ultimately you can draw in a lot of fans. But if they're drawing eyeballs, something that nobody wants to watch, it's largely for naught, and it puts on a bad reputation for the UFC. So all of that being said, kind of went through UFC, the main card of UFC Vegas 58, looking through a great performance by Cody Brundage, being able to go in there and knock out Tresean Gore. Antonina Shevchenko picks up a win. I know that she's been star for it. David Onama looked phenomenal in his submission of Garrett Armfield. Went in there in the second round, got it done. Kennedy Nezachikwu looked gigantic going against Carl Roberson, was able to just absolutely swarm him the entire length of the fight, finishing it with about 3 minutes left in the third round. So that was really, really interesting. Overall, I would rate the card about a 6.5, 7 out of 10. It was a free card, so not always going to have the most name value, but I think some of the fights were really interesting. Um, Personally, I think I went 6-1. My only loss is picking Jared Bandera over Chase Sherman. If you remember and go back to that video, I did say that the main pick there, though, is that the fight's not going to go to decision. So um, went with that. And I think I improved my overall rate until about 75% in 2022. Keith, I think he went 4-1, maybe 4-2 last week. So the Pickin Fights boys still got you coming out ahead. Personally, a lot of in the rare instances where I make a lot of parlays and a lot of my parlays hit, so I ended up with a little bit of cheddar in my wallet, in my Barstool bank account. That being said, let's move. That being said, let's move it on to the card that we're all here to talk about and discuss. UFC Fight Night: Ortega versus Rodriguez. We have Brian Ortega taking on Yair Rodriguez, both guys who are at the top of the featherweight division. Brian Ortega just coming off of his fight against Alexander Volkanovski. Yair Rodriguez coming off of a most recent win. If my thing will load here, coming off of actually a loss, should I say, to Max Holloway 6 months ago. We saw what Max went on and did to Volkanovski, which is not a ton of much. So, Yair Rodriguez